This is the other end, zip tie a dipstick. There it is, and look at there. So next week we're going to raise the deck of the trailer to the full position, and then we're going to get a running start with the tractor and see how far we can jump it. You can see it's throwing those big chunks out. I'd love to see him. Hey, welcome back to the channel. We're going to title this video, How to Use a Tiller on a Small Tractor. The reason being, we're going to assume that there's several people out there with less experience, and if you already have a lot of experience with tiller, maybe this video is not for you, or maybe you might pick up something you didn't know. If I miss anything in the video, please leave a comment in the comment section below. We're going to make the assumption that you already own the tiller, and we're going to make the assumption that your drive shaft for your PTO has been cut to the proper length. If you don't know this, when you buy a new tiller, you have to make sure that your drive shaft is cut to the proper length. You can do some serious damage to either the tiller or your tractor if the drive shaft's too long. I have a video showing how to cut the drive shaft. I'll leave a link in the description of this video if you've not seen that. So before we start, we're going to need a few items. We're going to need a grease gun, a crescent wrench, some carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner, and some penetrating oil, a rag, and a pair of pliers. I keep my Leatherman on me all the time. I love my Leatherman. It's like a plier. It's like a little mini toolbox in my pocket. So these are the things you'll need. You may need one or two more things along the way. If we do, we'll show you that as we do it. So most tillers are made up basically the same way. It's not a new technology in any way. You have a carrier bearing on one side, and you have a gearbox on the other that pulls the tillers around. Most units have a grease bearing on one side and an oil-filled bearing on the other side that is driven by a chain or gears. In my case, we have a gear drive tiller. I don't want to get into the debate whether tillers of this size are important, whether they're chain drive or gear drive. That's not important. I've seen both of them last for years and years and years and years, and so let's not get into that debate. All right, so this greaser is very, very important that you clean it. These are precision bearings, so you definitely do not want to push sand or dirt or grit down into these bearings. Make sure that you wash it off with brake cleaner and then wipe it off with a rag. This is something you're only going to do like twice a year, maybe 3-4 times a year if you're really a heavy user of the tiller. So I use a number 2 grease. That's your weight of grease. You got like 1.5, 2, so on and so forth. Use your manual to figure out which one is the best. Now, when you put your grease gun on here, it's an instinct to go ahead and just pump it just as full of grease as you possibly can, and that's actually the wrong thing to do. Some bearing housings will have what they call a WEPO. And what that does is it keeps you from over servicing. If you put too much grease in it, it will actually pop out the WEPO. And in some cases, there is not a WEPO. And if you over service the bearing, you can literally pop the seal out on the inside. So on the other side of this housing, there is a seal. And once you pop that out, the only way to fix it is to basically tear the tiller down. So I recommend pushing like 1, 2, 3. That's more than enough for grease, because you're constantly replenishing that every few months, every 6 months if you grease it every 6 months, or every 3 months depending on how much you use it. Just follow your manual to tell you, just don't go crazy with the grease. These are probably the most forgotten grease fittings on the tiller. There's a grease fitting on each end on the universal joint, but there's also a grease fitting on this shaft. And the reason that's important, there's a plastic bushing in there that if you don't re-grease, eventually it will dry out and melt the shaft, and next thing you know, your shaft's falling off, and there's all kind of headaches with that. But so all you have to do, we'll just walk you through it. So we're going to take the brake cleaner, spray off the mud and the dirt, clean that grease fitting off. Now what I have done, make sure you keep your toes out from under it. You want to be able to turn the tines of your tractor so that you can turn it where the grease fitting is easy to access. So I'd basically pull my tiller about 2 inches off the ground so the tines are free, and then now I'm able to put my grease gun right on the fitting, and it's not a big deal. Again, You can over service these a little bit if you want to. It's okay to squeeze grease out the side, but after probably about the second or third pump, you're kind of wasting your money. All right, so here is the one that is forgotten mostly. There's two grease fittings on this rubber shaft, or the shaft protector, one on each end. A lot of people forget to grease these, so just take you a little brake cleaner, clean off the excess dirt, just because you don't want to push extra mud and dirt into that. It's a plastic bearing, but you can make it go bad. And you just use your grease gun just the same as you would any other grease dirt, even though it's plastic. All right, so now I've greased that. There's a little bushing in there. Wipe that off to keep from grabbing dust. All right, the next thing I want to do is the shaft end, where you plug it into the tractor, you put it on the PTO shaft. I'm going to give this a healthy dose of penetrating oil, just to get this all free. Set in the outside, it might have a little rust, and then it makes it just that much easier to put on. And then next thing we're going to do is grease the other end, and then we'll move to the slip clutch. This is the other end. Again, we're just taking some brake cleaner, getting the yucky off of it so that we can put some grease in it. Okay, so we've got the other end. We've already cleaned the grease fitting off, and again, we're going to put just a few pumps of grease, trying to make sure it goes down into the bearing, or the bushings, plastic bushing, and that will allow this thing to rotate freely on the drive shaft. Okay, so we're going to clean this grease dirt off here. Again, these are really important, especially the universal joints. These are needle bearings, so it's very, very important that you clean this off. I've had to rotate the tiller around and move the drive shaft over to the side to make it to a point where I can access this grease fitting. This is probably the hardest one. That's why it's so important to do it in the spring when you're servicing, because you're not going to want to try to do this in the field. You got to be a contortionist to do this. All right, so that is all of our grease fittings greased. All right, so we've got our drive shaft hooked back up to the tractor, and we've got our safety chain wrapped around the upper link. You can put it in numerous places. Some people put it here, some people put it on top link. And this is going to keep the shaft from moving. It's just going to keep it stationary. So basically what will happen, it'll wind up and hold it into a position. That's again why it's so important to grease these plastic bushings. So the next thing we're going to do is a limited servicing of the slip clutch. And when I say limited, I mean all we're going to do is spray some good quality penetration oil on the slip clutch. I found that if you continuously spray your slip clutch throughout the year, maybe 3-4 times a year, just hit it with a good penetrating oil, that the oil will seep down into the clutch media and keep it from rusting together. So in some cases, it's kind of like it's almost welding the slip clutch together. So if you're not familiar with a slip clutch, I'll try to put a picture in this video if I can find one of an exploded view. But it's just a piece that, it's just a PTO shaft that comes to the metal. Then there's a clutch media, and then there's another piece of metal that carries the power onto the tiller. And what happens is if you hit a rock, instead of binding up the whole system, the clutch will slip on that clutch media. Well, if it sets over a period of time, the media will actually kind of weld itself or rust itself together to the actual metal plates. So if you take a good penetrating oil and spray that clutch, 2-3 times a year, I've never had one seize up. I have seen people have their seize up, but they're not maintaining it. This is an easy fix. The only other way to service a slip clutch is to look at your slip clutch manual. You have to disassemble the springs, loosen them up, turn it freely, and then retorque each spring around. I've just never had the use of doing that, as long as I use a good penetrating oil a few times a year. All right, so I'm just going to soak this slip clutch so you can see where I'm hitting in the middle. That's where the media is at. Be liberal with it. I was going to say that penetrating oil is cheap, but it's not cheap anymore. But it's still better than replacing a slip clutch or a drive line of a tractor. All right. All right, we're going to service this gearbox now, and some gearboxes will have a plug that you pull out on the side, and that lets you know you fill the gearbox up to that level. And if you're up to that level, then you know that it's full because it'll drain out the side just a little bit. I've taken the liberty of pulling this cap off on mine. I do not have that side plug, or if we do have it, it's covered up by some of these metal things. So what I've just done is got a zip tie, and you're just going to stick that straight down into the gearbox until you feel it touch the bottom. Okay, I felt it touch. Pull it back out, and you can see there I have about almost 2 inches of oil, maybe 1.5 inches of oil. So that means that it's from the bottom of that gearbox. It has that much oil in it. So the bottom gearbox, I'll touch it. I'm going to top that off just a little bit. So I'm using some 80-90 weight gear oil for mine. At some point, probably the next service, I'm going to pull this out and change it to a synthetic. Didn't have a whole lot left in this can. Let's see. Go ahead and test it. Again, we're just going to make our zip tie a dipstick. There it is, and look at there. Now we're going to be pretty much up to the center of the shaft, a little bit below the center, which is, in my opinion, where I want mine, and that's pretty much where the manual says. So you want to make sure that you fill your oil up to wherever your manual says. If you put too much oil in this, you will literally blow the seals out of the side, so don't just pour it to the top. That is very bad. So this gearbox has a fill plug on the side, and it's not a fill plug, it's where you fill the oil up to this point, and when oil starts leaking out of this, then you are full. So you fill it with this top plug, and you fill it up to this point. So we'll go ahead and take this plug off. I can see the oil right there. It's literally right at the very edge. Last thing we want to do before we go till is we're going to check our tines. Each tine has 2 bolts that hold them on. You want to inspect those bolts, make sure they're not loose. There's no indications of looseness. You can go ahead and take a couple of wrenches and put on them just to make sure. You also want to look at the edge of your tines and make sure that they're still reasonably sharp. They will wear down and wear down, basically wear down to the nubs. This tiller is very low hour use. My tines are in great shape. The bolts are all tight. So I think we're ready to go till. So next week we're going to raise the deck of the trailer to the full position, and then we're going to get a running start with the tractor and see how far we can jump it. Click in the comment below. All right, we're over at the farm. We got the tiller set up. I feel really good about the tiller. We did a test run at the house. Everything worked out perfectly. So now let's talk about tilling. Come on with me. All right, let's talk about the 2 kinds of tillers. The most common type of tiller is what I have here, which is a forward rotating tiller. It comes in, the blades come in and cut down and pull the dirt over and chop it up. That's the most common. There is a reverse tine tiller that actually goes against the tractor. As the tractor is pulling forward, it's pulling the dirt towards the tractor. So that again is pretty uncommon. You just hardly ever see any of them around. So what we're going to talk about today is a forward rotating tiller. All right, so why is that important? So each time the tiller rotates over, it literally is throwing dirt 6 inches back. So what that means is every time you till, you're moving all of your topsoil in the entire garden, whichever direction you're tilling, you're moving it six inches this way. So it's very important to always till downhill. That way you're always pulling your soil back to the top of the hill. As it rains, that soil migrates down. Each time you till downhill, and that's throwing that soil 6 inches back uphill. And that's a little technique, really. That was the only place he could go through. So that's just part of it. You got Gizmo here trying to explain something. There's all this other field to walk around, but he had to go through there. Anyway, Again, most important thing is to go downhill, and that throws your dirt back uphill. So you learn little things like that as you till more and more. So let's talk about tractor setup. The tiller is ground engaging, and it's literally pushing the tractor forward. So it's important. I like to keep the loader on the tractor when I'm tilling because that extra weight is on the front tires. And I also think it's very important to keep your four-wheel drive engaged. And what that does is it keeps the tiller from lunging the tractor forward. If you got it in two-wheel drive and you don't have the loader on, the tractor weighs less. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, it's nothing, you don't have to have the loader on, and you don't have to have it in four-wheel drive. It will still till, and most people may not notice, but over the years of tilling a lot, I find that leaving the loader on and leaving the four-wheel drive engaged keeps the tractor very, very stable, and it seems to pulverize the dirt better. And if the tractor lunges, you'll see in the dirt afterwards where the dirt is humped like this, and that's because the tractor is lunging. So if it's more stable you can keep the tractor, the more even the cuts you can make. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the rear tires and loading them. Our tires are loaded. If you're not familiar with that, it's filling the tires full of liquid. What that does is add additional ballast to the tractor, makes the tractor literally heavier without putting additional weight on the tractor bearing. All the weight is literally sitting on the wheels of the ground, so there's no extra weight on the bearings of the tractor. It's a great way to add extra weight and extra stability. I lied to you just a little bit. The rear tires are not the last thing, and this is probably one of the most important things about tiller I forgot to tell you about. The rear deck, or the rear gate here that flops up and down or holds up and down, that is very, very important for tiller use. So if you have the gate open like I have right now, it's going to throw a lot more of the dirt out in the back as chunks. If you put the gate down, then it's going to recycle that dirt through the tines and pulverize it to a smaller size. And this spring, we don't want that. We want to dry the dirt, so we're going to leave the gate all the way open. It's going to make big chunks come out, and that's going to allow air to get around the pieces of, the bigger chunks. It's going to allow nitrogen to get around the chunks. It's going to allow gizmo to get around the chunks, but it's also going to let oxygen get around the chunks. And then it's going to dry, like I said, it's going to help dry this out really fast. Then we'll come back for the second tilling, and we'll put this gate down, and it's going to repulverize the dirt and make it into a really nice fine soil. And there's a woodpecker pecking over my head. Let's get to tilling. Who's right? I said it's over my head. Hey, little buddy, let's go tilling. I'd love to see him. All right, so now we're going to talk about how I turn the tiller on. There's really no right or wrong way. It's just as a pretty seasoned technician, I don't like anything just to jab like really hard. So what I do is I bump my throttle up just ever so slightly. I'm going to go ahead and drop my tiller down so it's almost touching the ground. I'm going to turn my PTO on. Then I'm going to go ahead and drop my tiller in the ground and speed it up. You can see it's throwing those big chunks out. Now speed is another thing you need to think about. As a tiller, you don't want to go very fast. You want to go at a very, very moderate speed, and you want to keep that speed pretty much the same so that it doesn't cause humps in the soil. Yeah, this is going to aerate really well. Pretty good sized chunks. So this ground is a little bit drier than I thought it was, so I'm going to go ahead and take another pass. I wanted to do one extra pass just to see how it does. I may go ahead and try to dig a little deeper. Okay, let's talk about one thing I forgot. Angle of attack. This is important, and it's just things I just didn't think about until I'm actually doing it. I take it for granted everybody knows these things. And if you'll look at the side rail here, let me bring you around to this side. You'll see that this rail, this slide, it has an upwards angle. So you can extend your top link, and if you extend the top link, it's going to bring that rail up, and the tiller's going to basically ski and not engage the tines as much. So you can shorten the top link, and it's going to rotate it forward, and it's going thereby it's going to get the tines deeper into the soil, and it's taking a bigger bite. So if you're in a really heavy, hard, say dry soil conditions, and you want to till, you may need to tilt your tiller back just a little bit so you're not overloading your tractor. This is a 5-foot tiller, and it's really about perfect for this T25 in my opinion, in our soil condition. Your soil conditions may be different. You may need a 4-foot for this tractor. Either way, we're set up pretty good, and you can adjust how deep the tiller tills by just adjusting the pitch of the tiller to front to rear. Listen, I hope this helps you. If I forgot something, you guys that have done it as much as I have in tilling and tractors, leave a comment below for something I've forgotten. Let's help our community out. I really appreciate that, and everybody else will too. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, I really wish you would. We're really trying to grow our channel. And hit a thumbs up for the video like this. That helps the YouTube algorithm, I can't even say that word, algorithm, spread the video out to other people that are interested in this kind of content. And I really appreciate that too. God bless and have a great day.